managing the states between the client and the server. So in this topic, we are going to learn three important things: hidden fields, query strings, and the sessions. Right. So techniques for maintaining state information actually include these three things: hidden form fields, query strings, and the sessions. So first, let's think about the state team. What do you mean by the state information? Right. So as mentioned in before, uh, now hypertext transfer protocol was originally designed to be stateless. So what do you mean by the stateless? Because web browsers need not to store any persistent data about the visit to a website. So there may be a client web browser visits several times, or many web browsers visit several times to a server to access information, but it's originally stateless, so we don't need to keep the states regarding the client. We need a techniques to maintaining the states, however, right? That means we need to store persistent information about website visits that can be passed backwards and forwards between the client and the server for numerous reasons. Okay. So we have previously used web storages and cookies to store information locally on the client side. But information about individual visits to website also need to be maintained on the server side as well. So for some reasons we need to keep state information. So what are the reasons why we need web applications to maintain the state information about the client visits? First one is temporary store information as a user navigates through a multi-page form. So back and forth when user goes to a different web pages, we need to keep the information about users visits to different pages. And it also allows users to create bookmarks for returning to a specific location within a website, right? Because sometimes we need to jump here and there. And also it helps to customize individual web pages based on the user preferences, right? Some web pages you may have noticed we can customize according to our preferences. Sometimes some options we may not no longer need, so we can exclude it by viewing it. And also provide a shopping carts that store order information. So when you use eBay or Amazon or kind of website to order some products, uh, you often use the shopping carts, right? So you may add a product and go back and forth and do some browsing again and come back and add another product. So in that case, the shopping carts need to store about the order details without losing it. And also sometimes, most of the times, we need to store user IDs and passwords and use counters to keep track of how many times a user have visited the site. So therefore we need to keep maintain the state information. Okay, let's think now, come to a first important state related information. Um, so one way to manage the state between the client and the server in PHP is to use hidden form fields. So when a user submits a form on a web page, the form data is sent to the server using an probably HTTP post request or HTTP GET request, right? Most probably the HTTP post request. The server can then process the form data and send the response back to the client. By including hidden form fields in the form, web developers can pass some additional data to the server that can be used to manage the state between the request, right? So in order to create these hidden form fields, we need to use input element using the type hidden in the form, right? Always remember, when you use the input um, um, field or input element, we need to use um, type the name and value pairs, right? So so as I mentioned before, so when we submit the PHP script, submitted to the PHP scripts, it accesses the value submitted from the form with the get or post super global, so it will be stored there, these values, right? So we can then pass the form values from the one PHP script to another PHP script by storing the name values in input elements with type hidden. So here we have a form in the get method. So for example, here we have a input type hidden. So here I have a small PHP script. I can echo the tool ID and see how the tool ID looks like, right? So the hidden value will be visible if you view the page source on the client side, but when you execute, of course it will be displayed because it uses the echo statement, right? So let's explain this further by using another example. Okay, let's do I will show an example of how to use hidden form fields. So imagine I have created an index PHP file that contain a web form with hidden fields, right? Now just forget about the session start for the moment, because now this is just actually recording the user session, so I'll come to this later on. Now what here I have done in the session, in the index PHP file, I generate a unique ID using unique ID function and assign it to the user ID variable. So it's a random user ID for the current session. So this is also function. I'll come back to that later on. And then I store this user ID in the session super global, so we can use it across different requests. Now I have HTML form, right? So I use a process PHP file. I'll come back to it later. In this form, I have two hidden hidden fields, right? Two hidden fields. One is called for the user ID, and then the second for the session ID, right? So I have name values, okay? So the value in this case for the user ID is my the user ID that I have generated, unique user ID, and then for the session is the session ID which I generated in this current session. Then I have a small form that displays, now remember these two fields are hidden. This is just for me to capture this information for this session, because there is no way that in the server can understand the user in this case, right? So I need to understand the user, who is the user is, what is the user ID, what is the session ID. So that's what I capture it without knowing to the user, so it's hidden, it will not going to display. What I wanted to display for the user in the client is to capture the name, right? So I have another input field for the name, and then I have a submit button. Okay, so if I run this index PHP file, it looks like something like this, right? Its name, it capturing the name, so I can enter my name here, and then the submit button. So what happened when the submit button press? It goes to the process PHP file, right? Action is it send the information to the process PHP. So let's go to the process PHP. So I have created this file called process PHP that processes that form data, right? So in this example, I am retrieving the user ID and the session ID and the name, right? This is the name, from the post super global. So I use the post method, or super global, um, and I also actually um, validate. I use the HTML special chars functionality to validate and sanitize the name input. So I use this function to sanitize it, and then when I load the PHP index file, it will actually display my name and then my user ID in the current session, right? Uh, so in this way we can use the hidden form field to manage state between the client and the server in the PHP. So here we generate a unique user ID for each session and storing it in the session super global, then passing it to the server using the hidden form field, right? So this actually allows us to associate data with the particular user across the multiple requests, even if the user is not logged in or authenticated. So in this case, if I um, um, type my name and submit, you can see it displays hello, the username, my name, your user ID is this special unique user ID which I have generated. It captures the session as well. So this is an example of hidden form fields.